Ritchie Blackmore didn't just write great riffs. He defined what a hard rock guitar solo could be. Today, I'm ranking his 10 greatest Deep Purple studio solos. And yes, your favorite might be missing. This is a studio-only list, no live versions. So we're focusing on the definitive takes that made it to vinyl. Blackmore's catalog is deep enough that 20 solos could qualify, but these 10 show his evolution at its most focused and deliberate. So let's get into it. We're starting at number 10 with a pick that surprises people. Bad Attitude from the Mark II reunion era, and it belongs here. By 1987, Blackmore had spent a decade with Rainbow, and you can hear it on this solo. There's a darkness here, a maturity that classic Mark II era didn't have. The song itself sits on this heavy, mid-tempo groove, and the solo builds tension without ever releasing it completely. What makes this work is the restraint. This isn't shred for shred's sake. Every phrase has weight, and not all of his reunion-era solos were this well constructed. The House of Blue Light might not be in the top tier of Deep Purple albums, but this solo proves Blackmore still had ideas worth hearing. It's here at number 10 because while it's excellent, it's competing against some of the most iconic playing in rock history. So, something has to be at number 10. Staying with the reunion era, we have Wasted Sunsets, the ballad. 2 reunion-era picks in your bottom 3 might seem like I'm damning them with faint praise, but hear me out. This is about melodic content over technical fireworks, and on that measure, Wasted Sunsets delivers. The solo was introspective in a way Blackmore rarely allowed himself to be in the classic era. Now we're into the classic era, and Hard Lovin' Man is where Mark II really announced themselves. This album was the blueprint for everything that followed. Machine Head, Burn, the whole thing. And this solo is ground zero for that sound. What strikes you first is the rawness. There's no polish here, just aggression and explosiveness. And it has an early 70s, slightly hairy around the edges thing happening. And Blackmore is locked in with Pace and Glover in a way that makes the solo section, along with the rest of the song, feel like a galloping beast. This is Blackmore before he hit his neoclassical stride, and there's something pure about that. The solo sits in the pocket, never rushing, letting the rhythm section do half the work. Those phrases are more direct compared to what he'd do later, but they hit harder because of it. This is at number 8, not because it's lacking anything, but because what came after was built on this foundation. Here's where we need to talk about something specific. Strange Kind of Woman has 2 solos, and I'm ranking them as a package. The first one is short and punchy and gets in and out. The second one, to me, is the main event, extended a little bit, featuring that iconic descending run that became a Blackmore signature move. These solos were disciplined. No meandering, no self-indulgence, just maximum impact and minimum time. The harmonic minor runs that show up here became part of Blackmore's DNA. You hear them in Rainbow, you hear them decades later. He's starting to incorporate different ideas into a hard rock framework, and it works because the song structure supports it. What keeps this at number 7 is that it's transitional. You can feel Blackmore figuring out what he would become in his mature style. The ideas are all there, and the execution is flawless, but there's almost like a hesitation that disappeared on the live versions. That makes it fascinating, but not quite top 5 material when you're up against the fully realized versions of those ideas. Lazy is the long game. The studio version gives Blackmore nearly 3 minutes to work with, and he uses every second. This is the thinking person's extended solo. It's not just noodling around a blues scale and waiting for something interesting to happen. There's architecture here. He starts bluesy and relaxed, just like John Lord did in his solo, almost jazzy in the phrasing, and letting Lord's Hammond set the mood. Then he escalates. The phrases get longer, the technique gets flashier, but it never feels like it's showing off because the build is so gradual, you don't notice you've gone from laid back to face melting until you're already there. And the swing feel never goes away, even when he's running up and down the neck. Now, I know some of you are thinking about Made in Japan right now. Stop it. We're talking about studio versions only, and the studio lazy is a complete statement on its own terms. We've arrived at Mark III, and Mistreated is where Blackmore turned pain into sound. This is slow playing at its absolute peak. Every note matters, every bend has meaning, and every bit of sustain and vibrato is doing some sort of work. The solo builds quiet, then loud, and then back to quiet. It's as dynamic as storytelling. Blackmore isn't trying to impress you with speed or flashy technique here. He's trying to devastate you, and he succeeds. The phrasing is almost vocal. This became a career-defining piece for him, and he kept playing with Rainbow for years because it's that powerful. Here's the elephant in the room. Smoke on the Water has the most famous riff in rock history, but we're ranking the solo at number 4. Let that sink in for a second. The solo is actually underrated because everyone fixates on the riff and never talks about what came after it. What Blackmore does here is pentatonic mastery. The phrasing is conversational. It sounds like the guitar is talking to you and telling a story. There's not a wasted note in the entire thing. It's short, I don't know, what is it, 30 seconds? And, if you're generous, but it's constructed with the precision of a Swiss watch. Every phrase leads logically to the next, and the whole thing feels inevitable in retrospect. And those staccato bends at the end, oh man. Casual fans might say it should be higher because it's Smoke on the Water. Purists will say, perhaps, that it should be lower because it's too simple. I'm putting it here because while it's perfectly crafted, the solos ahead of it are doing more ambitious things. Child in Time is Deep Purple's great progressive epic, and Ritchie Blackmore's solo is, next to Ian Gillan's vocals, the heart of it. A single statement that starts restrained and keeps intensifying until it cuts off, almost brutally. What makes it work is pacing. Blackmore begins cautiously, almost sparingly, letting tension accumulate before gradually pushing harder. The solo never settles into a groove or reaches a comfortable peak. It just keeps climbing, becoming more and more urgent and more aggressive, forcing the organ to join in, until suddenly it ends and drops back to the song's theme. There's no release, no resolution, just a big impact. That's why this song and this solo feel so special. It's about contrast, sustained intensity, and long-form thinking. So why isn't it number 1? Because Child in Time represents Blackmore at his most expressive, but maybe not his most revolutionary. It's a masterwork in the progressive rock language of its era. The solos ranked above it didn't just perfect the form, they changed it. If we're talking about pure, technicality and speed and precision, Burn might be the single most impressive thing Blackmore ever recorded. It's face-melting. The tempo he maintains that precision at is impressive. This is peak Blackmore technique. Peak, how is he physically doing this? Those rapid-fire arpeggios over Pace's relentless drive sound almost mechanical in their precision. But they're still musical. If you play guitar, you know. That speed, with that clarity, is the result of thousands of hours of practice meeting natural talent at exactly the right moment. The neoclassical direction he'd been moving toward since Fireball arrives fully formed here. Here it is, the definitive Ritchie Blackmore solo. Speed, melody, structure, innovation, and impact all in one package. That ascending run that launches it is iconic. You hear those first few notes and you know exactly what's coming. But what makes this number 1 isn't just the opening. It's that the solo tells a story. There's an introduction, development, climax, and resolution. It's complete in a way that most rock solos aren't. John Lord also writes a complete piece for his solo. Blackmore isn't just playing fast. He's constructed a piece of music that happens to be a guitar solo. The technical performance is in service of the musical idea, not the other way around. The historical impact can't be ignored. This solo influenced generations of players who built a career on studying this blueprint. But it's not just for musicians. Non-players can follow this solo and sing along with it, and they can feel the structure even if they can't articulate why it works. That's the mark of something transcendent. Highway Star sits at number 1 because it's the complete package. It represents everything Blackmore was capable of at his absolute peak, on the album that defined hard rock for a generation, in a solo that remains the benchmark, 50 years plus later. This is the one where he proved you could be fast and melodic, structured and innovative all at the same time. This is the one that changed what guitarists thought was possible. That's why it's number 1. So there you have it, my top 10 Ritchie Blackmore Deep Purple studio solos. Did I get it right? Almost certainly not for everyone. You probably think Burns should be number 1, or that I'm underrating Child in Time, or that the reunion era shouldn't be in here at all. That's fine. Just, drop your own top 10 in the comments, and let me know which solo I criminally underrated. Before you go, notice what's not here. No Mark I era, which means no Hush, no April, none of that stuff. That's intentional. Mark II and beyond is where Blackmore became Blackmore. Also note the album distribution. 6 from Mark II, 2 from Mark III, and 2 from their reunion. This tells you something about where the creative peak was, and I'm comfortable with that assessment. This is the first in a series looking at the greatest solos from Deep Purple's guitarists and keyboard players. So if you want to see Tommy Bolin or Steve Morse get the same treatment, hit subscribe and stick around. Those are going to be fascinating in completely different ways. Until next time, have a great day.